Good morning. Get myself live here. Bear with me. There's always a lag. Good morning. I see myself live on Instagram. I see myself live on YouTube. How is everybody doing? K Hoagie P. K Hoagie P. I'm going to just wait a few minutes, see if anybody else comes online. Obviously, guys, this is going to be recorded. So if you're watching or listening to the replay, always bear with me as I get things set up. Holly's on. Good morning, Holly. Jackie, Marthy. Ladies, we're going to be talking a little bit about cortisol today. Jody's on. I'm actually very excited to talk about this because it's one of the things that it frustrates me so much for women who are truly trying to do all of the same things to, just make sure that they're staying fit and healthy, especially as they age. And I feel like there's just so many things that women need to understand. I say women specifically, that's primarily who I work with, but everybody needs to understand about cortisol. So a lot of misconceptions, some truth, some myths, a little bit of everything, and hopefully help you guys feel like you have a better understanding of what matters most, because if we have cortisol dysregulation, it can lead to some negative things. But most people are focusing on the wrong things when it comes to knowing what they should be changing. I don't know if I've told you this, but I still struggle with figuring out where I should be looking on my screen. Like right now, I'm looking directly at you on my camera, but I also got to be able to look at comments and all that stuff. So whatever looks like my eyes are moving around, it's probably because I'm looking at notes, or I'm looking at who's coming on, or I'm looking at YouTube. I have like 5 million tabs open. By the way, I had to like literally open a whole nother tab just for this because of all the tabs I have open. Does anybody else relate to that? It's a Monday morning. So, all right, let's get into this. I'm going to be speaking primarily to those of you guys that do CrossFit, because I think that there's a huge world of influencers out there. And I shouldn't say a huge world, there's a small world that are like, oh, like you should just stop doing high intensity training and follow my LIT program, my low intensity training program. And it's so bad for my body. And when I was doing this, it broke me down. Well, I think that contextually, we need to actually look at these people's lifestyles now versus where they were when they were at the, pinnacle of their fitness, is that they were likely under eating, overtraining in the pursuit of qualifying for the CrossFit games. Like hands down, that's what it is. When you pour that much effort and energy into everything, ignoring your body's cues, yeah, you're going to be inflamed. Yeah, that's a price you pay. In fact, I will be honest, I do not think that athletes are the healthiest people in the world. They're just not. Athletes live in extremes in any sport. They are always risking things. So it's also why it's so important when we're taking advice about, I even don't like to give a lot of advice about my own personal experiences as an athlete when I'm talking to my clients or even you that are listening on here, because I know that there are things that I've done to myself as an athlete that other people wouldn't understand. And in CrossFit, it's kind of a gray area because CrossFit's programming is meant to be something that keeps you fit. It's meant for longevity, but there does become a time when you have to shift and know, okay, this is an athletic pursuit consuming a lot of my mental energy, a lot of my physical energy, and I have to put a lot more into that, or I'm going to pursue this as a hobby and I'm going to make sure that my life is still in line, but I really want to be able to give everything I want in my training. And maybe you're neither of those things. Most of my clients are neither of those things. They're like, hey, if I make it to the next stages in CrossFit, that's a sign that my fitness is going in the right direction, right? So regardless of where you fall into the spectrum, whether you're competitive or not, I want you guys to be able to keep doing the training that you love. And I also want you guys, if you don't do high intensity training, maybe you're just stressed about the cortisol factor, understand what cortisol is doing to your body in good ways and in bad ways. And also for most of you, it's how is it impacting my body composition, my recovery? There's so many things out there, and the freaking cortisol fixes and the detoxes and all. It's just, come on. Let's just give you guys what you guys actually need to know. All right. So a little bit of a long intro for today's topic. So I think the main thing is that these are the 4 things that I hear very common with women when we're talking about cortisol. My cortisol must be high because you feel a certain way. You're like, I feel like shit. I'm puffy. I'm bloated. I'm not sleeping. Must be my cortisol. I hear CrossFit is wrecking my hormones. The intensity, the stress of it is too much for my body to handle. I can't handle this training. I need something lighter, lower intensity. I hear about belly fat. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about belly fat and cortisol levels. I know that was something that I fell into the victim of years and years ago when I was putting on weight and I was seeing it show up primarily in my midsection. And then also that you should probably just stop training so hard because you're wrecking your body by keeping your cortisol elevated. All of these things are truths you might be living in, but not that the solution isn't just stop spiking your cortisol or stop doing high intensity training. You need to learn to understand your body because cortisol is not the villain. In fact, cortisol is necessary. Understanding the importance of managing stress and recovery is more important. So let's talk a little bit about what cortisol actually is, because a lot of you guys might be just looking at cortisol like it's the demon out there when you don't realize how cortisol is designed to work for you. In fact, it's what wakes you up in the morning. It's what regulates your blood sugar. It's what helps you mobilize energy. It's what helps your body turn carbs into fuel or helps you turn protein into usable substrates for your muscles. I'm losing my voice. It actually is what helps drive adaptation. So it's what makes you fitter. It's what makes you stronger. It's what makes you more resilient. It actually controls your inflammation. So cortisol actually does help you with inflammation. It's why, cortisone, right? Like it's an anti-inflammatory. It helps your body respond to stress. Most importantly, like you would not live if you did not have cortisol. It is essential. It is simply a hormone released by your adrenal glands, and it's essential for your survival. It's just like every other hormone. It has a purpose in your body. It's when it becomes chronically dysregulated that we have an issue, okay? And I'm going to start by telling you this. There is no one fix to getting your cortisol regulated. Like there's none out there. And second thing is like, unless you've been able to, it's very hard to test cortisol levels. Blood level cortisols aren't very reliable because your blood level cortisols can rise just from the stress of getting blood taken. Saliva cortisol, urine cortisol tests, those are a little bit more accurate, but honestly, even those are just a single day, depending on where you're at on your menstrual cycle, depending on stress, like could also not be that hard or that easy for you to really tell. So it's really important for you to understand that even if you think cortisol is the problem, it might not actually be the problem. What's more important is like looking at the bigger picture. The hormone's not the problem. How you feel is. Are you feeling under a lot of stress? And that's not a cortisol issue. That's okay, like let's talk about stress management. And that's going to be part of what we're talking about things today. So let's go into some myths that I think that we need to talk about that are making you think that cortisol is the demon or that you need to stop training hard or you need to start controlling your cortisol levels, right? Because all of these things are leaving you stuck. Myth number 1 is that cortisol is making you fat, right? This is the biggest myth. I will give you one truth about cortisol in regards to belly fat, okay? Your fat cells all have hormone receptors. The fat cells in your abdomen primarily have 4 times the cortisol receptors as any other fat cells in your body. Why? Because that is where all of your vital organs are. So when we think about cortisol's role as keeping you alive, that's what protects your body. So if you're like the whole stress and fat in the belly or the belly fat connection, there is some truth to it. However, there's another piece of it that's more important. Why are you gaining body fat? Where you're gaining it doesn't matter as much as why you're gaining it. And that comes down to what's going on with your calorie intake or your calorie expenditure. Okay. So cortisol is not inherently making you fat. What does tend to dysregulate your hormones is the chronic stress, the poor recovery, poor sleep, and often for a lot of you guys, it's under eating. And When I say under eating, I think I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. Cheryl, I'm 15 to 20 pounds over fat. I am definitely not overeating because I was over the weekend. I had burritos and margaritas, and there's no way that I'm under eating. Okay. Under eating is not subjective just to calories and just to 1 or 2 days. It's the stress response from your eating patterns. So even if you are eating enough calories 1 or 2 days of the week when you're not thinking about it, if you're chronically in an underfed state, that's a stressor on your body. It's going to create more of a cortisol response. It's why I don't really love teaching it's okay to have higher days and lower days. There is times when it's okay to be a little over on your calories, and it's, yeah, maybe we need a little bit of a diet break, but we need to have consistency from day to day. That's what keeps cortisol from spiking and falling when we talk about diet. Okay. So when we have a lot of dysregulation in cortisol, we see that things like insulin sensitivity changes because it does impact your blood sugar. Your hunger hormones, ghrelin and leptin, get dysregulated, and that can cause you to eat more or have you, it could actually suppress your appetite. It's also important to understand that cortisol impacts the conversion of your thyroid hormones, and that can long-term negatively impact your thyroid, along with your menstrual cycle health. So all of these things can be impacted by having cortisol dysregulation. Now, none of this is going to be from an acute cortisol response. So you going to the gym and hitting a 10-minute Metcon that was high intensity isn't going to keep your your cortisol levels chronically elevated. We could talk about things that do cause that, but what's more important is looking at, okay, are you going right from that 10-minute workout, not even like taking a 5-minute break? You're like right in the car, getting on your phone to answer messages, driving, getting home, showering, not eating anything, going to work, instantly getting into your emails, literally going all day, getting home, not sleeping enough. Like that's where we're running into an issue, right? It's not the workout. It's the compounding of everything impacting things. All right. So when we talk about fat loss or fat gain, I should say, it's not the cortisol that's causing the issue. It's the chronic energy imbalance. It's the stress-driven behavior changes. So if you've ever been under a lot of stress and you're trying to stay focused at the gym, and you're like, I just can't do this right now. Okay, your workouts start to go down, your workouts start to suffer. Maybe you're getting stress responses and you're triggered to eat more. Okay, your recovery goes down, so you're not getting as good of a recovery from your workout, so you're not getting that stimulus. It can lead to muscle loss because cortisol does, or high cortisol does leave you in more of a catabolic state, especially when we talk about how it impacts your sleep. So sleep is when our body is like repairing. And if you're not getting enough sleep, your body's not going to get that. That's all not coming from a stressful workout. So if anybody's ever told you that you shouldn't be doing CrossFit because it's too stressful on your body, that's not the issue. All right. We could talk about where the issues can come in. Okay. Myth number 2 is where I'm going to go to, is that high intensity training is the problem. In fact, I just made a post about high intensity training on my feed or on my Instagram today, because high intensity training is actually beneficial for your body, right? So we talk about longevity, insulin sensitivity, resiliency, and in fact, even regulating hormones like insulin and cortisol. High intensity training, VO2 max training, all of this stuff can have a positive impact on your health, your longevity, and your recovery. It does make your body more resilient. That is going to keep you alive longer. It's going to allow your body to handle more stress. It's when it's chronically elevated that becomes the problem. Okay, so what you typically are hearing is that CrossFit spikes your cortisol and that we need to avoid that. No. You need to become more adaptive to how your body responds to stress. And CrossFit training can actually help you with training that, right? If you're going into every single workout, even when you're feeling so stressed, like you got to kill yourself, that's a different story. Okay. But your cortisol levels will come back down. They do, they regulate. This is where nutrition plays a factor. And you do want to make sure that you're having something in your post-workout window, because it doesn't have to be like a protein shake right away, but like within that 1 to 2 hours, you want to make sure you're getting nutrients in, because cortisol is going to spike your blood sugar. Cortisol is going to spike. your blood sugar is going to drop. Your body's looking for nutrients. Okay. So we need to shuttle those nutrients into your bloodstream. If that's not there, your cortisol levels are like, your hormones are like, hey, we need you. We need food. We need nourishment. So we need to make sure we're taking care of that. I think that women think that they shouldn't be training hard if their body starts to get more inflamed, or maybe this is, I also get this. A lot of women stress about training cortisol and high intensity because they're finding that they're more prone to injuries. Okay. High intensity training in itself will spike your cortisol levels. However, that's usually what's not leading to a lot of the injuries. It's a mismatch in your calorie intake, along with not the cortisol response, but the amount of stress and loading you're putting on your joints. So, for instance, I can do high intensity training on an Echo bike. It's not fun, but guess what? Very, very, very joint friendly. Still gets me the intensity piece. I can get my heart rate up just as high doing chest to bar pull-ups and thrusters. That is going to have a lot more wear and tear on my joints. And a lot of women, they confuse intensity with overuse. Okay. If your body is giving you signals of like, hey, like shoulders a little wonky, this is feeling a little off, like maybe that's the day where, like, when you see chest to bar pull-ups, you're like, I want to get the intensity piece, but I don't want to get the joint wear and tear. And that is where you hop on the bike, and rather than 21 chest to bars, you're doing 15 calories on the Echo bike. And you're like, oh, this is going to hurt even more because now there's not a skill component to it. It doesn't mean you can't do chest to bar pull-ups. It just means that in that moment, like, your body's telling you, like, hey, these movements might be a little iffy on my body today. All right. As you're aging, the longer into your sport you go, you do want to manage volume. Okay. Especially if you're following CrossFit and you're following like a competitive programming, because that's written for the masses and you have to know how your body's responding to the volume. I think the other thing is that we hear that the high intensity training is wrecking your hormones. Totally not true. Totally not true. Like, again, your workout of the day is not spiking it's not causing any impact on your hormones. It's the amount of stress you're under outside of that workout that's impacting how that workout is impacting your body. So the reality is that it does acutely raise your cortisol. That's good. It's necessary. It helps your body also understand how to utilize stored energy. So when we're talking about fat burning, that's actually helpful. It's what helps you get fitter. Okay. So really, we need to look at the bigger problems: under eating, poor sleep, high life stress, not taking deloads, always trying to follow the program and not learning how to modify for yourself, and adding intensity to all of that, right? When you're stacking all of that stress without having any recovery, you are going to end up burning out. Okay. You're going to start to find that so I've seen this happen in clients where it used to be known as adrenal fatigue, but HPA axis dysfunction. You've kept your cortisol, you've been running on cortisol for so long. You're always in that fight or flight. And your body's just churning it out over time, right? I see this in a lot of high-end athletes who are training for like years of high-end training. In fact, even myself, right? And then at some point, it's like all of a sudden the body's not getting that cortisol response, and your workouts start to feel flat. And you're like, I'm just not getting that same push that I used to get, or I don't want to. And it's learning how to not say, oh, I've burned myself out and I can't do this anymore, to, okay, I have definitely gotten to a place where cortisol is freaking completely downregulated and I can't even get my cortisol to spike anymore. And I need to get my body more cortisol sensitive again, because it's now cortisol, what's the word I'm looking for? Resistant. I was looking for the word cortisol resistant. Okay. So we need to look at that. All right. So I will be honest though, it is extremely hard for people to get there. I would say 1 in every 50 women would get there. I have one woman right now that I'm working with who has got a very similar personality to me. If you're watching this, I know you know who I'm talking about. Okay. Actually, I have two women I'm working with. And it's very hard because you're constantly in this state of questioning. Am I doing too much? Not enough? It's hard. But for most of you guys, it's just understanding how to work with your body. All right. Let's talk about myth number 3. I'm not hungry after my workout, so I don't need to eat. Okay. And we talk about cortisol. This isn't really directly related to cortisol, but this is a problem. All right. So cortisol does impact your appetite, and everybody has a different response to cortisol. For some people, it spikes their appetite. I'm starving. Others, they're not hungry. Okay. This is the golden component for you guys. You guys really need to listen to this. When you are done with your training, your cortisol levels and your adrenaline are elevated. In fact, I know for me, I like to start my morning with some kind of monostructural work. Why? Because your cortisol levels are highest in the morning. Okay. So I know I'm going to get a pretty good workout in. My body's in that fight or flight state. It's supposed to be. And it does make me feel more productive for a couple of hours. Like I'm riding that high of adrenaline. So it does actually lead to better productivity. But for some of you guys, if it's elevated, it can impact your appetite. I'm not usually hungry right away after my workout. However, by the time I get done, I start cooking my breakfast and get myself ready for the day, I'm hungry. So I eat breakfast probably about an hour after I finish training. And that's worked for me. And I don't think that you have to do that, but you can totally do like a post-workout shake and some carbs and then eat a meal a little bit later if your appetite is just not there. That's what works well for me. One of the other things is that your gut motility slows down. And this is why you don't want to eat something super heavy directly after your workout if you do have a very high response to your workout, because it will make you feel really bloated and full for a while after your workout. Okay. But the main thing is if you're not hungry, it's because your appetite might be suppressed from the training. And you kind of think, oh, well, I'm just not going to eat right now because I'm not hungry. I'm just going to eat later. And this usually backfires. Okay. One thing that happens is that you don't eat right away. Your nervous system stays in that fight or flight place. Your blood sugar will be high because your cortisol will spike your blood sugar. That's a pretty common problem. And then what happens is it drops later on. Your energy crashes. You will find that later in the day, after 4 p.m., usually after 3 or 4 p.m., you start to get cravings. And that's when you are also like having a hard time with your appetite. Maybe you're eating a lot of little things. Your recovery suffers, so you feel like you're not getting recovered from your workouts. And the biggest one for a lot of you, especially over 35, is you need to be doing everything you can to protect your muscle, right? Everything you can do to protect your muscle is so important after 35, because at 40, it's muscle wasting. 35 to 40 is you still have some time, but everything after 40 is like, what can I keep building and maintaining? Because everything is starting to change with hormones. All right. Muscle protein breakdown increases the longer you wait to eat. So you want to make sure that you are eating. Okay. Going into some specifics about eating, carbohydrates are going to help lower your cortisol levels. Those of you guys that are following a low carb diet and you're doing high intensity training, you are shooting yourself in the face. Okay. Like not even in the foot, like you're boom right here. Okay. You need to be eating carbohydrates in that post-workout window. Even if you are following like what I would like to call a lower carb diet, where you're eating your carbs should be around your training. Okay. You want to restore glycogen. You want to make sure that you are bringing your glycogen back up. This is going to help signal safety in your body. Okay. Insulin levels are coming back to regular. Cortisol levels are coming back down. I feel good again. Protein is the other thing. And this is important for muscle repair along with muscle protein breakdown. However, very, very, very important teaching here. If you are only ingesting protein post-workout, which is what a lot of people do, you're actually wasting your protein, because the body is very, very smart. Your body doesn't just run off of calories. Your body runs off of nutrients. Okay, so protein is important for muscle repair and preventing muscle breakdown. Carbohydrates, important for regulating blood sugar, restoring glycogen. Here's the kicker. Your body can convert protein and muscle into glycogen. It's designed to do that. That's a process that your body can do to prevent you from dying, to give you energy, okay? When you are only taking in protein post-window, chances are that protein is being converted into glucose. So your $60 tub of protein powder is now being turned into table sugar. So you are better off pairing your protein with a carbohydrate in that post-workout window. Okay, so if you're going to do something quick, that's what I would do. I would definitely make sure that you're eating within 1 to 2 hours. It does not need to be right away, but just something. Okay, it does need to happen. All right. Next myth I'm going to talk about, and I haven't been looking at Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. I'm just trying to stay focused because I know this one's going to get a little bit lengthy. If you guys have questions, just kind of be specific on your questions so I can come back to them. Myth number 4, cortisol belly means my hormones are broken, like, or like I have this cortisol belly that I got to get rid of, and that you need some special protocol. And I already talked about the fat receptors in your midsection, but there are some other things that are going to impact fat storage primarily around your midsection. So one of the biggest things is 35 plus women need to be aware of, like, estrogen levels. That's going to impact where your body is storing fat as well, along with insulin sensitivity. All right. So those things matter. Other things, like I mentioned, it's not just the workout, it's how cortisol is staying chronically elevated. And as I mentioned, where those fat receptors lie more in your abdomen, if you are getting your calories mismatched, so you're under eating or you're overeating, let me explain that in a second. But if there's a calorie mismatch and your body starts storing fat, if your cortisol is chronically dysregulated, you will store more fat in your abdomen. Okay, you will find that happening. Now, there are also some genetic predispositions just based on how you've looking at your body as how you've been for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? Like, this is how my body naturally stores weight. Okay. Really, really important to look at all of that stuff as well. Muscle mass is very important. Okay. Because this also keeps you more insulin sensitive and helps regulate insulin levels and cortisol and all that stuff. If you are under eating all the time, like you're not actually consistently eating enough, okay, your body is also likely becoming more muscle wasting, right? We're not getting enough energy in. The body is going to start pulling muscle. This is where you'll find that maybe your weight hasn't changed much, but your body composition is changing. You're like, all of a sudden, I am looking soft in the middle. Like, I'm feeling the muffin top. I'm not liking this, okay? Chronically being underfed is going to lead to muscle loss. Muscle loss leads to a lower metabolic rate. So you might not even be able to eat as much as you used to be able to eat, okay? Poor sleep and stress are going to increase your hunger and may also impact obviously your desire to work out. And that's where sometimes, okay, going into talking about high intensity training, if you're a woman that puts so much pressure on yourself that you see the workout of the day, and maybe it's a day where, like, you had a really horrible night of sleep and you see the workout of the day and it's something where you're supposed to be pushing yourself really hard. So you're like, well, I just can't go, right? That's not what we want either. And we want to find the balance there. I could actually just add this in here. I actually might have it written down later on, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about this now. This is where you shouldn't be focusing on always going high intensity. It's learning how to read your body. And so what's going to keep you consistent in the gym isn't today's a day where I have to push max output. Today's a day where maybe I should do something a little bit lower intensity. Okay. But it impacts your stress levels and your ability to be able to handle things. I think that also, as I mentioned, the changes in hormones, perimenopausal shifts in redistribution of body fat percentage or body fat weight, body fat is important to look at too. Okay. So this is why I wanted to kind of talk about all of this stuff. And I will talk a little bit about that, regulation of workouts first and foremost, because what's actually not helping you is just telling you just not to do high intensity training. And as I already started to talk about with that last point, it's knowing that every single session does not need to be, nor should it be, high intensity. In fact, that was not the way CrossFit was designed. CrossFit was not designed to be a test of your self-worth, your athleticism, every single session, every single piece. Intensity is relative. And what's more important is the mechanics and the consistency of your training, of your movements, right? So it's knowing, like, so this week, this is the week of the open, right? So for a lot of you guys, I would be keeping your intensity from Monday through Thursday at an RPE of like 7 to 8, right? I want to get a good training stimulus in. I want to feel productive. But on Friday, I want to send it home. I want to hit that workout with intensity without, well, we don't know what that workout's going to be, right? So like, that's the main thing, is that you should be focusing on that, right? You want to be as primed as possible for that. If you know that you are like, I'm just doing the open for fun, that might not be the thing. You might see one workout pop up on the board and you're like, this is the workout that I really want to test this week. Maybe it's a 1 rep max back squat. Maybe it's a running progression. Maybe it's a Metcon benchmark that you guys are doing. Okay. But you have to know that sprinkling it in is important. One of the things that I learned a long time ago that really helped me in my own training is when we're talking about the balance of our training, like 80% of it, we should be training. Like it should be that RPE 7 to 8, 8.5. We're learning how our body adapts. We're learning what we can push, what we can't push. We're learning pacing. We're learning about ourselves, right? 5 to 10% of it is skill work. It's, I'm trying to get better at these movements, right? The other 5 to 10% of it is going to be going hard. It's that one workout of the week that you're like going really, really hard, or that 2 workouts of the week. And that's important for you all to understand, because I think that what happens is we all burn out because we're always trying to test ourselves. It's hard not to. Being mature as an athlete, and I call you all athletes, if you work out hard, if you train in the gym and you're not just there to burn calories, you're an athlete, right? You're there for the goal of like, I want to be fitter today. So call yourself an athlete and freaking own that shit. But that's why it's important to moderate intensity. Okay. So here are the things that I feel like are just like not helping you, that you need to understand that if you switch these things around, you will get a better response. So if you think that you're like, man, like, okay, so I definitely know that I have some cortisol dysregulation. I don't even want to call it cortisol dysregulation. I want to talk more about the central nervous system, which if you're a client of mine, we are going to be diving into the central nervous system tomorrow on our group call. But it's really what it is that when we talk about cortisol, that gets released when our body is in that fight or flight. So we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Cortisol dysregulation is hand in hand with always living in that fight or flight. And I shouldn't say always, because it's, well, yes, it is always, because if you're in there all the time, sometimes that can actually cause to where you end up being too parasympathetic because your body's just burned out. Okay. So you have to understand that these things are not helping you at all. All right. When progress stalls, if you find yourself stalling in progress in the gym, that's not you failing. That's not you needing to train harder. If you know stress is a factor, it's okay. My body is not getting enough recovery to get the response I'm looking for. Recovery is more helpful. So for instance, I have a really hard time with deloads, but I have been working them in. And every time I do a deload, I always come back feeling a little bit better. And so what I'm learning is if I don't want to deload and like take a whole week off, I just have to be smarter about my training on a week-to-week basis and making sure I'm taking deloads in my week. Okay. So second thing that's not helping you, it's really hard to feel like you are out of control of your body, right? Because you're like, I'm gaining weight, I'm not losing weight, I want to get this weight off. And I think that it's, you need to create a calorie deficit. You need to get your appetite under control, but you're dropping calories too aggressively. And this comes down to either using online calculators or going back to old macros and not looking at, okay, where is my body needing actual fuel right now to create a safe space for me to create a calorie deficit? Because a calorie deficit isn't just about eating less. If you eat too little, cortisol is going to spike, appetite's going to spike, right? So if you're dropping calories too aggressively, you're screwing up. And you don't know what that is if you don't know where your calorie ceiling is. In fact, if that's you, reach out to me. You can DM me for a strategy session, and I will go through how I do this with my clients. Another thing that's not helping you is skipping those post-workout meals. I know that you're not hungry. I know that you might be trying to save calories for later in the day, but it's backfiring. Okay, so we need to make sure that we're getting in a post-workout meal. The other thing I see is obsessing so much over scale fluctuations. And this is really important if you are a high intensity trainee, okay? Because sometimes inflammation will spike your weight, your water weight. So that's pretty normal. You can't get stressed about weight spikes because they're going to be part of the process. you have to understand how to read weight trends. So I do really focus on getting my clients to understand what I'm looking at. I zoom in on the week and the days. I zoom out and I look at the month and month to month. And I look at how our trends are going, where things are plateauing. That's a much better way of gauging progress. Okay. I think the other thing that I see is shifting or not knowing how to shift, right? Like not knowing, okay, well, if I can't do the high intensity workout, what should I be doing? I think that it's really important to understand that like cardiovascular training, that's really what we're talking about, high intensity training, needs balance and finding the right balance of low intensity to high intensity training. So for instance, I do this myself. Okay. So like this morning was a high intensity session. It was a 4x4, which I almost talked myself out of. It was 4 minutes on, 3 minutes of recovery and for 4 sets. So meant to be a VO2 max testing workout. And it's the second week of doing it. And I had so much pressure about hitting the same numbers that I did last week. And I did not hit the same numbers I did last week. I was a little bit slower, but it was a harder day. So tomorrow will probably not be as hard. I will probably moderate things a little bit in my training in the morning because I did push that stress level this morning, and also moderating my stress outside of my training and making sure that I'm not getting hyper reactive to things throughout my day. Okay. So you don't want to just not go to the gym workout. You want to understand how to moderate things. The other thing I've seen a lot of women do is being told they need to lower cortisol or lower carbs because it's spiking their blood sugar, which is increasing their cortisol levels, which could not be further from false. Okay, further from the truth. That's not true. That's all I'm saying. It's not true. Okay, so your body needs carbohydrates. It's your body's preferred source of fuel. And when you're looking at the energy pathways, primarily CrossFit is glycolytic, meaning we're burning carbs. That's what makes our body more carb sensitive. So we need to be looking at fueling with the right amount of carbs. And then the final thing is like understanding, like if you're constantly living in fight or flight, you're not going to get the responses. Like you need to understand that outside of your training, you need to be looking at life. And that does not mean that you're like, okay, I can't do, XYZ. I gotta quit my job. It's like, let's just be less reactive. Being less reactive to things is so important. Not filling every dead space with something else you could be doing. I am so bad about this, but I am working really hard on shifting my schedule and feeling like I have a good flow to my day, especially right now as I'm going through a certification course, which was adding on like a little bit more work for me, but it was important for me to do, so all of this is just stuff that I really want you guys to understand. So let's talk about what's actually going to help you, right? So I'm talking about what you shouldn't be doing. Let's close up on talking about what you should be doing. And hopefully this is resonating with you guys a little bit. All right. So first and foremost, you need to fuel your training. All right. I don't care if you're a beginner and you're just starting off and you feel like you're a newbie. In fact, you're having a higher metabolic response to a lot of your training than a trained athlete is. But you need to be eating enough food. All right. So you need to understand that, like I mentioned, if you have fat loss goals, it's not just, okay, I'm sticking to these calories. It's, okay, how is my body responding to this amount of calories? You need to be eating enough food. You need to be prioritizing carbohydrates around your training, not fueling them, not fearing them. You need to be looking at sleep patterns. Okay. So this is part of, and when we talk about training, right? We need to recognize that training is a piece of your life. And the goal of training is that it's going to enhance your life, whether it makes you feel good, you're trying to get fitter, you're trying to change your body composition, you like the way it feels. That's one component of living a fit and healthy life. Okay. So like sleep is very important. All right. So you're not winning any rewards or any awards like living on 4 hours a night. Okay. So we need to be getting a consistent sleep schedule. Now, if you're like, how do I do that with my crazy amount of work stress and my 2 toddlers that wake me up at different times of the night? I understand that it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. It's what's one step I can do to protect getting a little bit more sleep tonight. And it might be as simple as, if you normally put the kids down at 9 p.m., you're starting at 8:45 tonight. right? Like it's making a small shift that way, right? It's looking at maybe talking to your husband about like who's on shift tonight. It's looking at, okay, maybe every night's not perfect, but you're finding ways to make the next night better. Averages matter more. Like one night of bad sleep isn't a bad thing, right? But it's when it's chronically happening. So I normally have 2 or 3 bad nights of sleep a week. That's pretty common for me, but I try and make sure the other nights are optimized. As I say this, I'm going to jinx myself. Watch, tonight I'm going to have a bad night of sleep. You want to make sure that your schedule for sleep is pretty consistent. And this is something that you do have control over, because likely you don't have control over people waking you up and you don't have control over what times, but it should still be consistent times. Okay. So please stop doom scrolling. Go to sleep. You don't have to catch up on Netflix right now. You need to sleep. Okay. Periodized training is another thing that you can be doing. So again, not maxing out every single session, but also not maxing out all year round. Like taking deload weeks, taking deload days, listening to your body and knowing when it's like, I maybe a little bit of a lighter week this week, and really being strategic with your intensity, as I already mentioned, like making sure that you're sprinkling it in, not making every day a test, making sure that you're focusing on building muscle, progressive overload. Again, that does not require you to max out every single session. It just means you have to have that was a heavy weight, and it's going to cause your body to have that response of, okay, I need to build muscle. That's going to support your metabolism. It's going to protect your hormones. Okay. So, and then I think the most important thing is if you find that you are constantly in that like fight or flight state, you're under a lot of stress, physically, mentally, emotionally, how can you down regulate? And I'm going to put an opposite on this as well. How can you down regulate? Like, what can we do to help remove stress? Maybe it's taking some walks. Maybe it's, I'm not really good about this, but like breath work. Maybe it's stressing, lower intensity days, boundaries. For me, I'm going to be honest, the best way that I can down regulate myself is I schedule regular massages. I know that sounds probably like hard for a lot of people, but I have a really hard time reacting when, or relaxing when I'm not forced to relax. So going for drives in my car, where I can actually just not have to be in front of a computer or have things to do, or massages really do help me because it's kind of forcing me to be in a dark spot, completely relaxed. I have a really, really, really hard time relaxing. So in fact, I personally believe that's where there's benefits of things like sauna, because I don't know that I personally don't think it's necessarily the heat. I think it's truly the state that the person's in, is like there's no distractions. They're typically in there, because I would bet somebody that goes into a sauna and they have their phone and they're like thinking about work and all stuff, they're probably not getting the benefits as much as somebody who's like, I'm in this sauna and I'm just sitting here enjoying this hot, I was gonna say hot weather, but that's where I live in Florida. But I'm just enjoying the heat. I'm like feeling relaxed. I'm letting my body recover. There's a huge difference, right? So I just want you guys to understand that the goal is not for you to eliminate cortisol or control your cortisol. It's understanding how your body responds and recovers from stress and how to help it respond and recover to stress more effectively. Okay. So if you are a female CrossFitter and you have ever felt like kind of torn between like, maybe I shouldn't be doing hot CrossFit, maybe I should be doing more, you don't need to change your program if you like CrossFit. It doesn't mean you have to do CrossFit. You don't have to, but I do think that high intensity training should be a part of your program. You're not broken. If you do feel like you're dysregulated, you're not broken. Your hormones are not failing you. Your body has adapted, and we just have to get your body to adapt in a positive way. Your training is not ruining your body. You need to understand how to fuel your training the right way. Stacking stress without adding adequate fuel and recovery is going to negatively impact your body. It's so important for you guys to realize that. Okay. So we don't need to think of cortisol like the enemy. We need to understand that there's a mismatch in what you're demanding of your body, and it's demanding too much on that. So if you do want to continue to train hard, you want to feel strong, you want to stay lean, and you're in that 35 plus club, you do not need to dilute your intensity. You don't need to stop doing intensity. You need to moderate it, and you need a better strategy. Okay. So if you're in that place right now and you're like, I just don't know what to do, I'm like stuck. I like doing CrossFit. I just see my body is just not changing the way that I want it to. I feel like I can't handle things like I used to. I'm feeling more prone to injuries, because we could talk about that as well. It's your stress and your fueling strategy. It's both those things. And that's exactly what I try and help my women with. And if that's you, I would love for you to book a strategy session with me. It's a no sweat, like no sweat intro, we'll call it that, as they do in the CrossFit gyms. No, it's literally a no pressure call. We can talk about what's going on with you, what your specific goals are, where you're struggling. I can help you find the mismatch and show you a little bit about what I do and assess what's really happening, so you have some direction. So if you do want to connect with me, I am the only person that answers my DM, so just DM me. It's funny because I do get that question all the time. Is this actually you in the DM? Yes, it's me. That's why if I start talking to you and then I ghost you, I didn't ghost you. It's probably because I signed off of my Instagram and went to bed or did something else, and I got to pop back in there. So, but let's assess, let's get you figured out, and hopefully we can troubleshoot some things and get you feeling really good again. So let me just pop over to see if there's any questions or anything like that. Just kind of seeing who else might be on here. Ooh, I see a lot of people. Valeria said check inbox. I will definitely make sure I check my inbox for you. Let me just make sure. Good morning. I see Kenneth. Oh man, old school. All right. I don't see any questions. Good morning, Holly. But if you guys do have any questions about anything, feel free to shoot me a message. If you're in my Facebook group, you could always put questions up in there as well. But until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye.